Alex Answer here, November 14th, 2016. Early in the morning, starting my day with sunshine and a cup of coffee. I'm going to start doing more of these podcasts. First thing in the morning, not every day, but every now and again, because they're easy to produce and get online without using a whole lot of data. That way, without producing a video, I can share with you some of my latest thoughts. And these are my latest thoughts. I've been up tossing and turning and tossing. We're going through this supermoon at the tail end of a geomagnetic storm. After an election, emotions are running high. Emotions are running very high. And so I think it's worthwhile to take a look at what's going on from a larger perspective, not a reactionary perspective, but a larger perspective, echoing some of the things that I said in a recent video. When I'm aligned with my own morals, my own truth, when I'm true to myself, it doesn't necessarily make me anti-someone else or a particular candidate. It means that I am being true to myself. What I see right now on the planet, it disturbs me. It's keeping me up at night. This evil that almost seems to have the so-called radical left or anyone that's dissenting against Trump in their crosshairs. I think this is very dangerous. The way that we are being conditioned to judge others that aren't on board some sort of a program. For those of us that have been activists, or for those of us that have been seeking to know what is this matrix for a number of years, we're seeing how this propaganda is repeating itself. I would say that it's changing itself up every 4 years. And so certain aspects of the public are not recognizing the propaganda when it's there. Here we have this phenomena with Trump, which is really Obama 2.0. And there are so many people out there that are still not getting it. And even if they do get it, they do start waking up soon. What's done is done. The man has been placed in power. It was nice to get this percolator at this thrift store recently, by the way, for, what did I pay, about $2.50? I certainly get tired of the instant coffee. It's nice to have decent things around that don't require power. It's also one of the reasons why I'm doing some of these podcasts. It doesn't require lights or use of a camera, only in a computer and a microphone. And I can get it online the same day or same hour. I see an evil behind Trump, but an evil that is not too different than the evil that also is behind Clinton. Those that would call those of us seen through the Trump deception. By calling us Clinton supporters, they're showing they don't know very much about us. If, for example, you've questioned the official story of 9/11, if, for example, you've talked about the global conspiracy, those are not leftist talking points. In fact, those are things that the left attacks. Being from that world, if you will, and having left Portland a long time ago, I know what it's like to be talked to like an idiot by not just Democrats, but those that claim to be anarchists. In fact, I post every now and then on the Portland Reddit page where I attempt to, like a clean and sober person trying to share the message with the addict who's still suffering. Well, there's actually a lot of things that I think are going to happen in Portland at some point. So even though some people talk to me like I'm a conspiracy theorist, I see it as ground zero for certain events when World War III begins. And so there's a reason why I continue to talk to Portlanders, and there's a reason why I watch Portland with a very close eye. It's because I'm also watching which one of my projections and predictions are coming true. I'm feeling it out because I lived in Portland most of my life, and for 10 years I hosted Outside the Box TV in Portland while dreaming of living off the grid and even bringing my truth back into the grid, not by being there, but by sending it over the internet. And here we are in the day and age of YouTube, of the Dropbox, of the file transfer. Here we are standing in the day and age of the file transfer. And so streaming video can actually do a lot to take a message somewhere without actually physically being there. And it takes a strong spirit on my part to keep speaking to the people of Portland through shows that I turn in on Portland Cable Access, through a friend who receives my file there in Portland and literally puts it on the air. I've been on the air a few times in the last year by tapes or files that I've submitted, because I feel that I should continue to deliver the warning and remind people that they are not an island, that they are affected by these greater changes. So I see how the people of Portland are being demonized, and I feel that I need to be making this podcast and release these thoughts and energy, because I feel this great evil behind that demonization of the independent thinker. There are a lot of people in Portland that do not identify with Democrat or Republican. That's the nature of the culture. And even though I may feel like my ideas were so different than Portland, that I have said for years was kind of overrun with a certain hipster element, and it became like the cool scene, man, yeah, and really like not a very desirable place to be anymore, but it had its time. And it still in a way has its place as a mecca for independent thinkers or lost souls to come to Portland and hopefully in some cases find themselves and do something positive with their lives. Not every lost soul that is led to Portland, Oregon ends up literally destroying their life. Some people literally do end up using some of their talents. So it is a place of artistic diversity as well as being a place of darkness. I guess in the darkness sometimes the light within can shine so bright that can lead us out of the pit. I think I've learned a lot about life and spirituality from my experience in Portland, Oregon, as well as the conspiracy, as well as sheeple-like behavior where they're going, Obama. I can see how they also go, Donald. Not so much Portlanders, but others. I learned a lot about the hive mind in Portland, Oregon. And so I easily recognize the hive mind attributes and those sociopathic aspects of our society. When people talk to us like we're nothing because we think differently than them, and they try to marginalize us as a radical leftist or a radical rightist, depending on where they're coming from. If they're coming from the right, we're a leftist. If they're coming from the left, we're a radical right-wing extremist. This is always how things work. These are always ways in which the true independent thinker is attacked. There are people saying that those protesters in Portland, Oregon are all paid. Literally, that they're all getting checks from George Soros. That is ridiculous. It is a part of the Portland culture. It has been a part of the Portland culture before I was a sperm cell tadpole. Before I came out of the womb, if you will, there were massive protests in Portland against the Vietnam War. There's something about the energy in Portland. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I will bring this up. This is another thing that actually should draw a closer microscope on some of my previous words and statements on Portland. During solar maximums, and we're at the tail end of this, and it's almost ending with a bang. This election selection geomagnetic storm combined with a supermoon. In a place like Portland, Oregon, Greg Braden has written about this 0 point. Not 0 point energy, folks. Magnetic zero, rather. That there is this line of energy that runs around the planet, and he says it's where the greatest change takes place. That's why you see a lot of change in West Coast cities. And the other side of the line actually goes through parts of the Middle East. And when I came across this knowledge and information, and being someone that's been an advocate for greater awareness as to what's going on in the Middle East, I literally felt like I was able to tap into that sense of bombs dropping on the ground. There's a sense of fire and rage as well as pain and trauma within me during the initial years of my TV show, and it's actually continued to this day because of what continues to happen in Afghanistan. There's this sense of trauma. Part of me moving out of a city like Portland, Oregon, there were many motivations there for getting out of a highly energized city, even though there were a certain number of epiphanies I came to while in Portland. Greater sensitivity to certain things, a greater sense of passion. There were other adverse effects that I felt from being in Portland. Now, this podcast isn't just about Portland, but since it is, in a way, one of the ground zero points, if you will, for protests, anti-Trump protests, because they're all being marginalized as Soros-backed, Soros-bought and paid for agitators. I think that someone needs to set the record straight with regards to someone that's actually been there and been a part of demonstrations, even demonstrations when Obama was the president. That's why I talk about being treated certain ways, not to stay stuck on it, but to highlight, a number of things in this podcast. I think people should also contemplate how there's that sense of independence, the independent spirit that's at the root of these demonstrations. At the same time, you see how they're co-opted by repeating the same slogans, being partisan based, not doing or not being as active like that when they have a politician in office that they like, i.e. Barack Obama. Barack Obama, with his domestic policies, he has marketed himself to the voters for a certain amount of time, certain number of years, that he's different, that he's a man of compassion. After all, hey, he's a man of color, first black president. Why would he not be a man of compassion towards minority groups and others? In reality, it's always been a show, and I've always been somewhat upset with those, including some minority groups, that believe that because they're not being affected and because they have some positive opportunities for themselves, that's the exact same thing going on in the Middle East. When you realize that it is true that under Obama's watch, 9 out of 10 that have been struck by drones have been civilians. I mean, this is not exactly actions you would expect from an Islamic president if, in fact, Obama went rogue, went unconstitutional because he was a closet Muslim. And this is the propaganda that's been propped up by the extreme right and the mainstream right for a number of years. They've never actually really addressed it unless they want to use it as a political tool. Obama the mass murderer, Obama the war criminal. So in that sense, yes, maybe they'll actually repeat some of those facts about what's actually been going on in Afghanistan, only if it benefits them and their candidate at the moment. The candidate that they're pushing at the moment. But how many people actually genuinely care about those millions dead? So, without going on and on for hours, I want to bring it back to center. I want to bring it back to center because even though I sense that there is, that's just a real natural response on the part of Portlanders when they have mainstream Republicans elected. Mainstream or the perception of fringe. Yes, there's the perception that Donald Trump is not mainstream and he's not establishment. That's a false perception. And as more neocons join the cabinet of Donald Trump, that's going to become more apparent. But I still see this whole scale demonization of the Portland protester and of other protesters. And I certainly don't agree with some of their tactics. I certainly would never be caught dead, if you will, at a rally where they're burning a flag or where they're all chanting the same thing or where it's an Occupy-styled event, because I'm too much of an independent thinker for those folks. And I will still call out the hypocrisy with those demonstrators because they were not active during the Obama administration. If they were active, i.e. Occupy and others, if anything, they were calling on Obama as if he was some sort of a friend to hear their grievances regarding student loan debt or minimum wage. The way I look at that, even if you have minorities in the protest, it's still selfish. It's still selfish, typical American behavior, how we're taught how to act, how to sit there and cause a fit in the streets if we don't get our way, without a greater understanding of real economics and why things are the way that they are. And a big part of that truth is that the left and the right are working together. And you'll notice there's a fair amount of people that actually say things that sound similar to what I'm saying, but in the end, they go to bat for the left or the right. So you want to talk about a situation in which they cause a massive mental health crisis in the United States? We're living through those times. The suicide hotline is reporting a record number of people calling in, reporting feelings of suicide. Now, I take a deep breath. For years, I've talked about the links between geomagnetic storms and suicidal thoughts, violent behaviors. New Scientist magazine actually did a story in 2008 on the links between extreme bipolar behavior, geomagnetic storms, and suicidal thoughts. I think there's a connection here. So when you throw in a selection and people in a certain, in the centralized superstate, that's why there are people talking about seceding on the West Coast right now. It's also going along with this geomagnetic storm and the full moon. And I think people maybe even being tapped into the fact that they're going to be really adversely affected by World War III. And I've talked about that for years. Portland, West Coast cities, it's because of where they are. And so people in Middle America seem to have no awareness of this or no compassion for this. That the actions of the misleaders, Bush, Obama, Trump, and that which will follow Trump, be it Clinton in 2020 or someone else, or Pence after the staged assassination of Donald Trump, pick your flavor, pick your poison. As we move into the phase in which bombs are dropping, I've always seen Portland, Oregon as ground zero, like something out of a Megadeth cover. Peace sells, but who's buying? Not just the bombed out UN building in New York City, but places like Portland, Oregon being ground zero. Headhunters, human trafficking, the things that will happen after the dust settles of the bombs that are dropped. And they may not even be nuclear. And perhaps bombs aren't even necessary. Certainly in this day and age, all you really have to do is take out the grid, take out resources, access to water and food, create emergency, shut down the freeways, use one of your executive orders, and then throw in a little bit of manufactured civil unrest, maybe a staged assassination of someone that is elected, that is very popular to an aspect of the population, very unpopular to an aspect of the population. And again, I reference the 2005 video game trailer as seen in my outside the box intro, Shattered Union, the video game, depicting UN peacekeeping forces being dispatched to the United States after some sort of an attack. It's that video game trailer that I believe has a lot of truth embedded within it. And a lot of these things kick off after one of the most unpopular presidents in U.S. history is elected. And I believe that Donald Trump fits that bill. He's very unpopular to a large aspect of this society. And he's incredibly popular and desirable and worshipped by a sizable aspect of the society. Donald Trump, in my opinion, was selected to continue this, you could almost call it a psychic, non-physical Civil War energy to the next level, to where it becomes physical, to the point where anti-Trump individuals, or people that aren't for Donald Trump, end up shooting in frustration anti-Trump protesters, which is what happened just the other day. According to Portland police, a suspected gang associate shot at a protester when the protest worked its way from downtown to the east side of the Morrison Bridge, parallel to MLK 99E eastbound, major street, major highway. That's very stupid. That's a recipe for disaster, to be provoking drivers along that street. Eventually, you're going to come across a hood rat who's going to go, fuck you, motherfucker. I don't give a fuck. I hate Donald Trump, too. You ain't stopped me from going nowhere, motherfucker. Pop, pop, pop. As this guy literally thought that was a good use of his Tech 9 just the other night. Shooting at a protester. Tech 9, nigga. Oh, my God. So I look at these pictures also. And what I see more minority men as well. Olive skin faces. Young college students. There's also stories of hate crimes rising after the Trump election in California universities and other places. Also, Islamic teachers. I put out a warning to Muslims well over a year ago. Muslims don't listen to shows like this. Some are coming and going. but there is such strong programming within their culture that it's important to be Muslim, and I'm not attacking, but I think that's why those that are Islamic leaning, why the numbers are so low. And then there are some that are Muslim that are listening. And I've been putting out a warning for years regarding this war on terror and people being profiled within this country. And I've been very frustrated with, for example, family members on my father's side that I've never really gotten a chance to know. For those of you that know my racial background, you know that I'm mixed and that I was raised in a English-speaking only, single mother household. And so I didn't grow up to be a Muslim. I grew up actually to become an activist beginning in 2004. And I believe that some of the things that I have talked about regarding 9/11 and other things actually scared family members, other Ansaris, if you will. I've seen other Ansaris work for the government under the Bush administration. I've seen other Ansaris work for the government under the Obama administration and show their love for this political process. And I consider that to be a form of not terrorism, but Stockholm Syndrome. Not very different than what a lot of mainstream leftists and rightists are on board. Like a system of thought to where voting works, that we're being represented in government. And for foreigners, there's a lot more pressure to assimilate, to love what this system is as it is, to be the perfect American. And so I think there's a lot of peer pressure for actual Middle Eastern immigrants. I was actually born here. And so that's the difference between me and them. And I only speak English. And, there's genetically on my father's side, that's really the only difference between me and you. And perhaps where my soul's been, my soul's history, and where your soul has been, your soul history, and what you are tasked with doing, and why you are alive here in this matrix, speaking or hearing, listening to the sound of my voice right now. And I know on a spiritual level, there's a reason why I chose to, or why I at least have ended up in a world of hardship, to where I have faced certain judgments, but I've also felt a sense of protection that my life here is not meant to be a reactionary life where I go out and join some war or revolution, but to use the knowledge that I have within me, to share the knowledge that I have within me with others around the world through these mediums. That's the path that I'm taking. Having said that, I have noticed that I am one of the few of a particular line, if you will, bloodline, genetic code, or combination of genetic code, that is both rare, as well as my lifestyle and the very things that I talk about, my spiritual perspectives being very unique and outside the box. And so instead of hide that from you, instead of conform, instead of do things for more numbers, I'm going to continue to share aspects of my soul with you and share what I really see is going on here. So going back to my reference to the pictures that I'm seeing of the appearances of some of these protesters that are being so widely demonized, I see some brown faces there that are scared. Some of these people have no idea that Trump was actually selected or that presidents are selected. And by the way, there are people that voted for Trump that used to say the same thing years ago, and they're acting like Trump is outside that system. So keep this in mind. There are certain people that really don't know that presidents are selected. They don't know that the New World Order is real. They don't know that Obama was serving the New World Order. So they're seeing this, and it's meant to look that way, as a major step back for rights of non-whites, minorities, if you will, women's rights. All this has been actually built up by design. Trump is playing his role in this. I want to make sure you understand this. Trump is playing his role in this. If there's some sort of a stage assassination, Trump's going to be drinking, a nice little umbrella drink in some sort of island, maybe hanging out with Hitler. Maybe hanging out with Lavoy Finicum. I'm speculating. But if there is anything like that, it's going to be set up to cause fighting in the streets, which CNN will be televising. It'll be very racially charged. I'm seeing the rhetoric even on my YouTube channel. In some of the videos, people are talking about, well, soon, we will be getting rid of the Jews and the subhumans. And it comes periodically. It doesn't come every day. But Yeah, I feel aspects of the machine. It's like the demiurge consciousness. Check out my video, The Hypostasis of the Archons, which was uploaded recently. And when you look into things like that, or the idea of the matrix, or the idea of artificial intelligence, when you look at the idea of bots on Facebook today, you can see aspects of that artificial intelligence. Even if human programmers are creating the algorithm, it is still artificial intelligence, which has one use and one use only: propaganda, and it's racially based. Facebook is a massive purveyor of fake news. They've played a huge role in the manufacturing of the psychosis that Muslims are invading at this time, enforcing Sharia law. All that really, like a powder keg, went off like an info bomb of disinformation earlier in 2016 and earlier in 2015. And that laid the way for the Donald Trump presidency, even though he was selected. And I just want to point out, they're saying that half the country didn't vote. And then you see people that are programmed. And I'll say, I don't notice very minorities amongst the crowd of guilt trippers saying, well, if you didn't vote, you have no reason to complain. What kind of European slave think is this? What kind of medieval programming inside the genetic code is this, that you have to pick a master? This is some sort of medieval programming. Others I've noticed have also commented on the medieval programming. I've actually commented also on those pop-ups on video sharing sites of the medieval babe, with the red eyes, who, it's time to go back to Rome or the Dark Ages and fight the gargoyles, if you will, the hordes coming over the wall, the barbarians. And then Donald Trump is there screaming on stage like a schizophrenic, like Adolf Hitler, saying we are going after the barbarians, in a day and age where a professor was let go from his job or suspended for teaching a course, or within his class, giving a instruction, if you will, or a presentation on the parallels between the rise of Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump. A parent got wind of it and went on the attack. So we're seeing free speech under attack. We're seeing really this birth of the alt-right, which came out of the alternative media, which is a specific branch of the alternative media that actually believes that voting works, that Donald Trump is fighting the establishment, and that issues like white genocide, issues like less white people, issues like white supremacy are dominant themes that are actually in the backdrop. And again, there's denial that these things are taking place. Meanwhile, we're seeing stories, and there are people saying that those stories are manufactured. Okay, they certainly aren't saying the stories are manufactured when it comes to the mainstream media talking about Muslim this and Muslim that. But there are stories of white men attacking women that wear the hijab in California at various universities. One woman was reportedly choked. My concern is it's only a matter of time before some of these gang rapes are filmed and put on LiveLeak. And I felt this way at least a year, that, gang rapes are on the way. They've already been, military troops have already been gang raping the women to begin with. They don't want to help the people of the Middle East. They don't want to see people live in a greater world of freedom. If they were, they want to be bombing them back to the Stone Age and marginalizing all people as one way. There's a reason also why some women will voluntarily wear the hijab. And whether you agree with that or not, I mean, there's things that women do carry with them, like mace and other things to protect themselves, but it's believed to be a form of protection. And I think that there is a world that some women can tap into, cellular memory, to where they are afraid and they don't want to go back to a world where they're bought and sold based on their beauty. So there are, whether you agree with it or not, some motivations why, especially in this sex-obsessed culture. I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I noticed how women would avoid eye contact with me specifically. And I did feel that it was because of my Persian or Arabic attributes on one side of my genetics. So I'm jumping around to different topics. I did say that to say that I don't really believe that the people of Portland are really outside the system, if you will, of judging someone based on how they look. But because of where they are on the map, on the earth, because there are different ley lines and portals, if you will, and ways that certain parts of the planet are reacting, you're going to see more protests on the West Coast during this time. Naturally, when groups that have a lot of minorities within them, not just Muslims, but Hispanics. And when you have someone, let's go back to Donald Trump, being the demiurge or representing the machine, even if Donald Trump doesn't even have those particular feelings or racist feelings, and he can have black friends and he can have Saudi friends, but he's playing this role that is bringing out the worst within our society here in the United States. So you see the KKK is having rallies. You see other known white supremacist groups throwing their support behind Donald Trump. This hasn't happened before with other presidential candidates. And so it shows you if someone could not officially be racist and have all these, international connections and be seen as a man that's outside the establishment, even though he literally is the living, breathing, walking Biff from Back to the Future 2, where he goes to the future, and literally it's Biff Casino, it's Trump Casino. So the man is a outside the establishment maverick who's not a racist, who wants to investigate 9/11 and the Fed to one group of people, and to the other, he's someone who's going to deport millions of people. He's going to break up families. He's going to put people with strange sounding names in a database. That's one of my personal concerns. What are you going to do? Just grab all names that seem like they're or appear or are from that part of the world and just assume they're all Muslims and put them in the database and plan to go after them later? Is that the plan? How do we know that's not the plan? At the very least, let me tell you this. If it's not the plan, Donald Trump and those that support Donald Trump, and I mean those that really support Donald Trump, I don't mean the global dupes that are content consumers. I'm talking about others in power, okay? Those that wear the pants, not commentators on YouTube videos, but actual politicians, money changers, people in the military-industrial complex. We look at the associations of Donald Trump, by the way, and the new cabinet that's being formed. We look at the new press secretary. We see the Prince of Saudi Arabia, one of them, calling the Donald Trump presidency brilliant, whereas before they were playing like they were worried about Donald Trump. That was all an act to prop up the fallacy that the establishment hates Trump and we're going to rig it in the favor of Clinton. That was not the plan. It was the plan the whole time for Trump to be selected, and some sort of a coalition is being built right now between Russia, Trump, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. And my speculation is they're going to go after some of these ethnic lines. They're going to go after some of these ancient tribes. They're going to go after some of these people and continue to kill millions of people in a joint coalition in the Middle East, as we literally see the fabric of the New World Order go to the next level. That's the type of U.S.-Russia relations that are going to be restored and expanded. Not something that is really about peace for the world, but a cooperation, a partnership, if you will, in Murder Inc. Incorporated, the global New World Order, Murder Inc. They demonize, however, in the meantime, going back to that, the independent thinker, saying that they're all funded by Soros, that we're all funded by Soros. If you are capable of an independent thought and you're either with us or against us, you're either with us or you're with Soros. Now that they have cemented this into the public consciousness, what are they going to do with that? Because what I'm alluding to now is this is not just about demonizing certain Middle Eastern countries and certain Middle Eastern bloodlines. It's demonizing people that live in certain parts of the country. Now, I don't know how there's a connection with this. Maybe it's just an accident. It's just more, but I've been telling you for years, my intuition showed me there's something that's going to be happening in Portland. That's why I had to get away from that place, and why I have a vested interest in reaching some Portlanders. And if you're a Portlander and you want to help me reach other Portlanders on cable access by turning in tapes, you are needed at this time. Find a way to contact me personally. If you are a Portlander now and you think other Portlanders should be exposed to these warnings and this information, your help is needed now. And I believe all this brings good energy, good karma when we seek to do right. There are aspects, though, of some people call it fear porn, but it's fake conspiracy news in the alternative media that is packaged as something that is there to warn us, but it's absolute disinformation. And so when you live in a world where there's so much disinformation, where others are giving false warnings and providing false projections and predictions, we need to be aware that we're up against that. So I have a philosophy of speaking my truth, uploading and producing that truth, putting it on the web or on the website, and letting it reach the person that it needs to reach. And the way this works now with the web and the suggested videos and other forms of synchronicity and people sharing videos on websites, on Facebook, you can take this video and you can share this with a friend or a relative or someone in Portland or another major city that's facing some of the threats that Portland does. Getting back to my main point, they are demonizing those dissenting against the Trump. And we can see certain places in the country to where there is the most dissent. We see Portland, Oregon was already called Little Beirut because of the way they were responding during a previous solar cycle induced massive protest, year 2000. We see the pre-9/11 massive protest during that solar cycle. WTO 1999, Seattle, Washington, they were riding the solar wave. They were riding the solar wave at the middle, if you will, of that cycle. And some of these cycles have 2 peaks. And maybe this cycle may have 3 peaks to it, to where you have a concentration of sunspots and solar flares around the maximum portion of the cycle. It dips down. There's a period of inactivity, and then boom, you have a trajectory, an increase that may go on for several months or a year until a decline. So some of these solar maximum periods, like this last one, now I've really only been studying solar cycles intently, deliberately, since 2008 and 2009, although I've always been aware of cycles within our lives. It just took me a while to connect the sun with it, while people mostly connect other planets and things of that nature. I, for some reason, was drawn straight to the sun, bypassing all of this perceived stronger planetary Neptune influence. But again, going straight to the sun, if you will. Straight to source, one could say. And so I started looking at this stuff around 2008 and 2009, and I noticed what I call archonic influence, as well as civil unrest, as well as dream invasions in other people, as were more concerns about World War III, or at least the propaganda surrounding that Obama was going to have a World War III with Russia from day one. We can see periods in which people are more reactive, and when the fake news machine, if you will, is amped up. And the fake news machine, it's not always the result of a conspiracy. During these solar waves and solar peaks and solar maximums, you see aspects of the population, they go into catastrophobia mode, to where they're perceiving that at that moment, it's all about to come to an end. And I think that was one of the greater motivations behind Y2K, being a period where a lot of that perception was strong. Same thing 12 years later with 2012. 2011, 2012, we saw Fukushima. People were saying literally that we were all going to be dead within a few years of Fukushima. And I think a lot of that anxiety and fear, some of it scientifically based, was really emotionally and energetically based. There's also a massive solar flare that did take place several days before the Fukushima earthquake. Even if HAARP was used, they were simply using what was, and I'm speculating, what was naturally already there in the atmosphere, in the ionosphere, that increased electromagnetic energy, which is naturally already linked to earthquakes and solar flares. So if there is any technology where they can flip a switch, and I believe that there is, to where they can affect certain areas, or steer a hurricane in at a 45-degree angle or 90-degree angle, like we saw with Hurricane Katrina, also following a solar cycle or solar flares, hitting the magnetic field, triggering a G2, or in some cases G3 geomagnetic storm. Of course, you can monitor these things in real time at spaceweather.gov and spaceweather.com. So that's where we are, folks. We are now, and we're still experiencing it now. I felt it really strong earlier this morning. Wow. full moon and seeing this evil energy behind Trump. It's not so much, what Trump is really like behind the scenes, the real Donald Trump, the role that he is playing, at least, for the world. It's like a big giant robot without real human emotion or intelligence, but a robot like an Archon, spewing this vile energy from the mouth and from the eyes, like a robotic opening and closing of the mouth, like a big giant mountain, like Castle Grayskull, if you will, or Sauron from Lord of the Rings, the all-seeing eye. That evil eye, or consciousness, artificial intelligence, if you will, that's running the show. I see Donald Trump as being a representation of that. This message is coming to you via the internet. And that same energy, that race divide, consciousness, the illusions of separation, it is alive and well. My lifetime is marked by my speaking against it, as well as bringing this to you, that Facebook has been hijacked by this demiurge consciousness. As you see the fake news exploding, trying to frighten you. This group is after you. This group is after you. And on and on and on. They'll show this headline saying, Muslims demand this from the U.S. military. A couple of lies there. One, that they're enlisting massive amounts of Muslims. There are Muslims that are serving the armed forces. I'm talking about massive Muslims, like a big, Muslim gang militia that Obama's developing. Complete hogwash, complete bullshit. But they'll put those headlines there, and the man will be wearing something that a Sikh will wear. He won't be wearing a typical turban. And so it's like they make it obvious. And sometimes instead of spelling protesters ER, it'll be OR. And so others are observing how there's certain clues that they leave when it's a fake news headline. One other fake news headline that Pam Geller, she was the one that said, no Muslims in my shooting range. And she's like some weird reptilian woman. I don't know what her deal is, where she just almost seems to have an orgasm by putting people in fear and representing women as being completely hateful and demon possessed. She's getting some sort of an orgasm from that and showing women what a real demon devil woman actually is. But that aside, she is putting out information saying that at these protests that they're defecating on Trump signs. And someone took a look at one of her reports claiming that there was this defecation in the streets where they defecated on a Trump sign. What that actually was some sort of bizarre performance art that took place in Mexico City in the year 2012. And so this is not the first time that we've seen this, to where they'll take a video and they are making this boogeyman out of what they are labeling this radical left that they say loves Muslim rape. Paul Joseph Watson and InfoWars for a long time, and they've been maintaining this, that the white women are going Muslim. And even before this meme took off, I was here to tell you that no, I don't believe that is actually the case. In fact, I believe that most women prefer to stay with their own or be with someone of a solid line, as my experience is someone mixed of both lines. And living in places like Portland, Oregon that are supposedly so open. I disagree with the assessment of Alex Jones and Paul Joseph Watson. And I would say that instead, I think that a lot of men are having issues with women these days and have found themselves undesirable because of certain biological things that are going on right now, certain energies that are really intense right now. It doesn't mean that, everybody's gone asexual. I would say that the propaganda, the gender warfare, it has complicated the dating lives of many people around the planet. Okay. White, black, mixed, really doesn't matter. And there's always going to be this overarching propaganda directed at men and women to not think too hard and to not truly look for the answers. And being someone that's on that path, I realize that most people, most men, most women aren't on that path. But I will say that the demographics of this audience does show it's 90% male and it's 10% female. So it is obvious and it is evident that it is men that are attracted to whatever it is that I'm sharing within this podcast, and women for the most part are not attracted to it. So I think things like that, with what men and women are attracted to or whatever, has more to do with social engineering and things like that. It's not necessarily racially motivated. It has more to do with, where our spirits are, whether that's attracting people or repelling people. Unfortunately, the work of Paul Joseph Watson and others, it's created an hysteria, and it's created this also anger at the white woman, at the American woman, for, not loving the white man enough and turning toward the dark skins. And I know that my mother was resented for bringing in a brown baby, myself, into this world, and going outside of the so-called master blue blood race. And there's definitely some sort of blue blood energy on my mother's side of the very dominant Germanic bloodlines. And to know how she was probably treated in that period, have we really changed as a society? And do I still sense this anger at women from the spee system, if you will, for bringing diverse forms of life into this planet? Absolutely. I feel it every day. I feel every day what they themselves may not be aware of, this anger towards them from something, from a dark spiritual place, for allowing biological diversity to flourish here on the planet. There is some sort of an evil behind this whole thing, and it's not really about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. They're just fronts. But the Nazi ideology, as well as the kill whitey ideology, it doesn't fly under one flag. And that's probably one of the most important things you have to take from this. It's this absolute demonization of any group whatsoever. And this mentality of, okay, we have to just now get rid of this genetic seed, and the world will just be fine. And so whether it's actual human beings, in some cases, it is. Those that are commenting on my channel and others, it's time to kill the Jews. And for some reason, there's a number of people out there that are convinced that I'm some sort of New World Order Jew. And so I've always experienced a little bit of hate, but yet my body, for whatever reason, is protected long enough for me to continue to this age, at least of 36 years old. So a lot of the hate comes over the internet. And when I go to town, if my hair is not clean, combed, because of my genetic code, I have naturally curly hair. So unless I'm going to shave my head, which I'm not a fan of, or constantly pay money to have my hair cut short, which I don't necessarily do, the curls start developing around the ends. There's perhaps other ways of describing this for those of you that are hairdressers or whatnot. It has a curl effect. And I've noticed that when my hair naturally curls, combined with periods to where I haven't shaved for a few days, I clearly have that look. To people there now in the society that are programmed to fear people that have that look, because I've seen them put up pictures of those they say are suspected terrorists. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see a similarity in skin tone there, similarity in nose there. And for years, Portlanders and others would literally argue with me like I was some sort of an idiot or an asshole for suggesting that certain people have that programming. Now we fast forward from when they were calling me a liar years ago to the year 2016, and I happen to live in Trump County, and I know that if I'm going to go to town and if I'm going to look a certain way, more than a few people are going to develop what I call an unhealthy obsession with what I'm doing in their store and where I came from. Because it really doesn't matter how many thousands of hours and podcasts I've done in the English language to express some form of intelligence. When I am walking through anywhere, any mainstream box store, okay, I can easily be identified as one of them. And it's something that I live with, that some of you do not live with. What I'm trying to ask you to ask yourself within your own consciousness, for some of you, is what is it about your consciousness that has no empathy for that experience? Because there's a certain amount of you that literally have no empathy for that experience. And the question is this a spiritual sickness? Is this just a lack of information? Or is there something about you naturally in your current biological form that's naturally cold-blooded, that naturally doesn't have that form of empathy? Now, I don't think that We are slaves to our genetic code. And I think that when you direct your thoughts towards more loving thoughts, more empathetic thoughts, that it affects your genetics. It affects your genetic code in a positive way when you're opening up your heart. The events of today are manufactured to close the heart. And that's what I learned when I went to Portland. I saw people that were previously open-hearted, that were so affected by the housing crisis. I was shocked that I went back to Portland, Oregon, despite this, oh, no racism, no Trump. And I felt that because I was different, that's the real reason why I was left in my car. Because I was different in terms of my body, but also different in terms of my spirit and the things that I speak of, the things come out of my mouth. Outside the box TV, a combination of all of the elements, like a cocktail at a bar or a health club. The actual combination of the ingredients. The combination of ingredients that I think are actually good. Different in this way. I'm different in this way. I see this area different. I have various interests. And I don't just talk about World War III. I'm very interested in the celestial solar aspect of it. You know, and I wonder if the combination of my genetics has enabled me to actually have these perceptions. Did I actually choose the temporary human body suit specifically? That's beyond my current level of awareness. But it's very possible that we actually pick our genetic biosuits, our bodies, prior to arriving, the spirit arriving in the body, after the act of conception between the male and the female, the seed and the egg, activating a form of life, and then a spirit or a soul waking up within that particular reality. Not too different than Neo in the Matrix, in a literal sense. Our world doesn't necessarily look like the world that it did when Neo woke up in it, but are we living in a world where almost something, this machine, is feeding on our pain and our misery and our worry about the future? Absolutely. In a world where at times that Archon will masquerade as God itself? Absolutely. There seems to be a reason why our civilization has been fed and bred and brought up to where it's been brought up to at this time. Has their agenda actually been mass depopulation of the entire planet? Or has the marry and be plenty and cause great chaos and cause great bloodshed and make more babies to do more of that? Has that been the greater reality in this human farm? This is a matrix, and I have every interest in helping all those that I am able to help, but most of all myself. I'm here to help us pass through the gates of this matrix. Using available information, spiritual texts, I will be reading aspects of the Gnostic Gospels on this YouTube channel. And not just looking at the nature of the archons, but the nature of who we are. Because to do that is to actually literally go beyond the illusions of separation. To actually take time to read scripture and read poetry and read things of this world that help us go beyond the illusions of separation. Before I leave you today, I will leave you with what my ancestor left the world. He lived in Herat, Afghanistan as a Sufi, outside the mainstream Islamic way of thought and way of life. Oddly enough, it was at the age of 36 that he went, and I call it off the grid for lack of a better, outside the consensus reality system. And so I'm going to be sharing aspects of what he left behind. And what I'm about to read, it's a famous poem by Rumi, and it is very similar to Taoism. Beginning, from the unmanifest I came, and pitched my tent of material existence. I passed through mineral and vegetable kingdoms. Then my mind carried me into the animal kingdom. Having reached there, I crossed beyond it. Then in the crystal clear shell of the human heart, I nursed the drop of self into a pearl. And in association with good men, I wandered round the prayer house, and having experienced that, crossed beyond that, then I took the road that leads to God, and I became a slave at God's gate. And then the duality disappeared in me, and I became absorbed in the one. So I think there's a lot there. Without a doubt, I believe that the genetic line that I have come from, maybe not specifically the Ansar line, but that part of the world that is currently being demonized, and that a genocide is being planned. And it is possible that I will not live to see 80 or 70 or 60. What it is important is that while I was alive, that I share with you where I came from, and that I share with you this unique perspective that there's a reason why these so-called world leaders and misleaders, Russia, US, while they're working together to torture the people of the Middle East, while leading the people astray and holding them hostage out of fear, at the same time saying that World War III was just averted, as they prepare to expand their hot war in the Middle East, which is simply a cold war to the people of the earth. It's really a hot war to the people of the Middle East. And white supremacy as it's known, is more of a artificial construct that is actually there to invite great evil into the homes, into the lives of those Westerners that are hoping to see horrible things happen to people that don't look like them. There's some sort of spiritual entrapment that I see behind the whole thing. As far as I'm concerned, if I reach just a few souls and help just a few souls liberate themselves from this matrix, then I have done my job. I will be back with additional podcasts. There are very few people at all at this time supporting what it is that I do. If you want to show your support, visit alexhansery.tv and click on the donate link. It is November 14th, 2016. I'm Alex Hansery, and I'll be back with more. Share this video with your friends and loved ones, and help many others be exposed to this outside the box way of looking at our world today.